You know, for decades, when you thought about global power struggles, your mind probably jumped to places like the Middle East or the South China Sea, right? But what if I told you that a new great game is heating up, and it's happening a whole lot closer to home? We're talking about the Caribbean and Latin America, a region that's fast becoming a global chessboard.
And that's really the big question we're digging into here. Why all the noise all of a sudden? Well, the answer involves giant container ships, a global economic tug-of-war, a pretty shocking flood of illegal weapons, and the revival of a very old and very controversial piece of U.S. foreign policy.
Okay, so to really get what's happening now, we have to rewind a little and look at how things used to be. For the longest time, Latin America and the Caribbean were kind of an afterthought in U.S. foreign policy. Some even called it a period of benign neglect. But that has all changed, dramatically. So, according to analysis from the Modern War Institute, a recent shift in Washington has put the Americas squarely back in the spotlight. But here's the thing. This renewed attention isn't all sunshine and roses. All the uncertainty about the U.S. approach has left a lot of regional leaders kind of scrambling, looking for new and maybe more predictable partners.
To really see how this is all playing out on the ground, let's zoom in. We're going to go from the big 30,000-foot view to a single, absolutely critical location, a deep water port that is, for all intents and purposes, the strategic heart of the Caribbean. And we are talking about the port of Kingston in Jamaica.
Wow. Look at that number, 2.14 million TEU. Now, what does that actually mean? Well, a TEU is basically the standard size of one of those big metal shipping containers you see on ships and trains. So we're talking about over 2 million containers moving through this one port every single year. This is not just some local dock, it is a global heavyweight.
And what's so fascinating about this is the story it tells. I mean, Kingston is home to the world's 7th largest natural harbor. Its location is pure strategic gold. It's just a stone's throw from the major shipping lanes of the Panama Canal. All of this makes it the top transshipment hub in the entire Caribbean. It's a vital gateway connecting North America, Latin America, Europe, and Asia. And you know, wherever you find a strategic asset as juicy as the Port of Kingston, you are absolutely going to find global players taking notice. And the first major player in this story is China, with its incredibly ambitious global infrastructure plan.
So you've probably heard of this, the Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI. On the surface, it's this huge global development project. It's pitched as a win-win opportunity for nations to build the infrastructure they desperately need. And man, has it been popular. More than 138 countries have signed on, and that includes 8 in the Caribbean, all of them drawn in by the promise of Chinese investment. But this is where we get to the core of the tension. Chinese officials will tell you the BRI is all about friendship and mutual benefit. But from a U.S. security perspective, it looks a whole lot more like a tool for soft power. The big concern is that these massive loans could create what are called debt traps. Basically, if a country can't pay back the loan, it might be forced to hand over control of the very thing that was built, like a port, giving Beijing some serious long-term strategic leverage.
Okay, so how is the United States responding to all this growing influence? Well, a huge piece of the puzzle is a specific branch of the U.S. military. We're talking about the U.S. Southern Command, or SOUTHCOM. Think of them as the Pentagon's arm for all military operations in Central and South America and the Caribbean.
For about the last decade, it's been SOUTHCOM ringing the alarm bells in Washington. Their leaders have been consistently telling Congress, hey, pay attention to the growing economic and political influence of not just China, but also Russia and Iran right here in our hemisphere. They've really become a key counterweight in the whole region. And this quote from their commander, Admiral Alvin Halsey, it just perfectly sums up their whole strategy. See, SOUTHCOM's approach isn't about confrontation. It's about partnership. The whole idea is to meet presence with presence. In other words, let's strengthen our alliances and work side by side with our regional partners to face these new challenges together. So SOUTHCOM really sees itself as an anchor in these pretty chaotic waters. And it's not just focused on China, it's also focused on the stuff that destabilizes the region from the inside, like crime and corruption. And, this is crucial, it's also pushing for non-military responses, promoting economic tools like the U.S. Export-Import Bank to offer a real partnership-based alternative to some of the other offers on the table.
But look, this whole geopolitical contest isn't just happening in boardrooms or with economic deals. It's playing out against this backdrop of really intense regional instability, a brutal, violent reality on the ground. And that violence, which, by the way, creates openings for outside powers to exploit, is being fueled by a steady stream of American hardware.
70%. Just let that sink in for a second. According to a 2021 Government Accountability Office report, that is the percentage of firearms recovered at crime scenes in Mexico that, when they're traced, are found to have originated right here in the United States. It is a staggering, mind-boggling figure that points to a massive crisis of arms trafficking.
And this has led to proposals for legislative action like the ARMAS Act of 2025. And its findings are pretty stark. It says this flood of U.S. origin firearms is directly fueling human rights violations, it's propping up gangs and organized crime, and it's even seen as a key reason people are fleeing Central America. That kind of instability really weakens U.S. partnerships in the region.
So what's the fix? Well, the ARMAS Act proposes a pretty straightforward two-step solution. First, shift regulatory control of certain arms exports away from the Commerce Department and back to the State Department, which is generally seen as having a stronger security focus. And second, create a unified, all-hands-on-deck government strategy to disrupt trafficking and, this is key, to actually monitor where these weapons end up.
All of this, the competition with China, the focus on security, the whole debate over partnership versus pressure, it's all coming together and coalescing around one of the most loaded, most controversial ideas in the entire history of U.S. foreign policy.
And there it is. That's the phrase a U.S. National Security Advisor reportedly used to defend this more assertive, pressure-based approach to the region, a Monroe Doctrine 2.0. And for anyone who knows the history of the Americas, well, those three words land like a thunderclap.
So why is that such a big deal? Because the original Monroe Doctrine from way back in 1823, while it started as a warning to European powers to stay out of the Americas, it eventually became the justification for decades of U.S. intervention and, imperialism in Latin America. It basically treated the hemisphere not as a region of partners, but as a territory to be controlled. So bringing that term back has, as one source put it, ruffled a lot of feathers. And that, right there, leaves us with the ultimate question. Which path is it going to be? Is the future going to be defined by that partnership-focused model that SOUTHCOM is pushing, standing shoulder to shoulder with allies? Or is it going to be a more assertive, pressure-based Monroe Doctrine 2.0? Honestly, the future of the Americas really does hang in the balance.